Hey guys, so we are going to look at Holly Blakey's testimony in the Jonathan Majors trial. It's really short compared to the other segments that we looked at. It's 30 pages total, including the beginning and end of the document. Holly Blakey is a friend of Grace Jabbari. She's been a friend of hers for several years. They also are co-workers, essentially. Holly Blakey is a decently well-known dance choreographer. She has a lot of artistic work. She's part of Box Artist Management, which is Ben Totty's company, talent company. And we're going to look at how she testified in the Jonathan Majors trial. Before we get started with that, though, I do want to point out that on December 8th, 2023, she did post this picture of Grace Jabbari, and the caption is just Grace Jabbari over and over and over again. This was, I believe, let's double check the day. It was after her testimony, so the same day she testified. She went to her Instagram and posted this photo, and I'm not seeing it now. Maybe there's more. Oh, here it is. But Ben Totty also liked and fired this picture, and this was before Ben Totty was actually set to testify. He was going to testify the following week, I believe on Monday. So, just some context. They apparently still seem to be friends. That doesn't mean that her character or testimony is any less credible. It's just something that you should consider when you're questioning someone's credibility. And the jury obviously wouldn't know that she went and posted that on Instagram. So let's start reading this. So 8th of December, this is the first witness after direct had ended on that Friday. So Holly Blakey enters and they put her under oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. State your name and county of residence. My name is Holly Blakey. I'm from Camden, London. Spell your last name for the record. And I think we all, early on, we were all struggling with spelling her name. I think we all got it as Blake Lee with an extra L in there, but it's Blakey. Good morning. Do us a favor. I know this is nerve-wracking, but if you could just speak as loudly as you can into the microphone. That's why would the judge, what if they didn't think it was nerve-wracking? And now the judge is telling the witness, I know this is nerve-wracking. That just kind of puts something into the air. If you hear the word objection from the well of the courtroom, don't answer. Wait until I instruct you whether or not to answer, okay? So she says okay. And then Galloway, the ADA, says, may I inquire? Sure. Good morning, Miss Blakey. Would you introduce yourself to the members of the jury? My name is Holly Blakey. I'm from London. Well, I'm sorry to apologize, but into that microphone. We need to hear you. Yes. I'm Holly Blakey. I'm from London. I have 2 kids. What more do you need? Where are you currently living? I live in Camden. Are you originally from the United Kingdom? I am. And you said you had 2 children. How old are they? Winter is nearly 2. She's tiny. And Owen will be 5 in March. What do you do for a living? I'm a choreographer. Can you explain what that entails to the members of the jury? Making up dances. How long have you been doing that? I've danced all my life. I've been choreographing since I was about 23. I'm 36 now. Did you receive any professional training to become a choreographer? Yeah, I did a BA in dance. Yeah. Where did you get your BA from? At Roehampton University in London. Did there come a time when you met a woman named Grace? Yes. When was that? That was in 2015. She was auditioning for me. What was your relationship when you first met her in 2015? I was doing a show in it, so let's let that be clear. She was auditioning for me, so that means the work product of Grace Jabbari's work is something that Holly Blakey would in turn make money off of, because she's going to be part of productions that Holly Blakey is putting on or a part of and bringing Grace Jabbari and any other qualified dancers along for. What was your relationship when you first met her in 2015? I was doing a show in a gallery that was then a later piece that toured. She was a dancer in the show. And that might be that cow puncher thing. How did your relationship progress over time? We kept working together, and actually let me say what I'm referencing there. As long as Grace Jabbari hasn't gone private, she unprivated her Instagram again. And there's some stuff that she did before the pandemic, and then it looks like she may have done again after the pandemic. Either that or it's old photos. But it's this thing, that's her butt there. Cowpuncher, and I don't know what the MA stands for, I forget, but it's something that Holly Blakey has always been a part of producing as far as Grace Jabbari's been a part of it. So they're not just friends, they make money together. So how did your relationship progress over time? We kept working together constantly since then, actually, so we stayed very close working together, really, continually from then until now. When you say really close, do you mean professionally? I mean professionally and personally. How long have you been personal friends? Maybe a month or two after we met, I guess. Did there come a time when you met a man by the name of Jonathan Majors? So Jonathan Majors gets a last name, Grace just gets Grace. Yes. How did you meet him? I first met him when I was doing a screening at South Bank Centre in London of a film I had made with an artist I was working with. Grace was in the film, and he came to see it. Do you know approximately when that was? I was pregnant with Winter, so I think... And it was locked down, so it was maybe 2.5... No, it wasn't locked down. It was maybe 2.5 years ago, something like that. And I'll forgive, honestly, I'll forgive anyone that can't remember lockdown dates, because I don't know if it's everybody, but a lot of people seem to... It's like a meme that since COVID started in 2020 through 2023, everyone seems to feel like that time has been blurred. So, that wasn't really a full 3 years because COVID came along. So, totally not, I'm not going to criticize her for not being sure of how old or when her baby was born. Did you have an opportunity to speak with the defendant? Only very briefly at that time. What was your impression at that time? Very sweet, charming. Objection. The judge says, you don't want that or you want to withdraw that? Yes, I'm sorry. I got a gesture and I jumped up. All right, I think that objection is withdrawn. You can answer the question. Very sweet and charming person. That's weird. And in what context did you meet him? In the lobby at the South Bank Centre, where the screening was. Were him and Mr. Jabbari in a relationship? Yes. Did there come a time when you met him again? Yes, a few times. When was that? Well, one time Jonathan came to my house for dinner with Gracie. So we're going to Gracie now. And how were him and Mr. Jabbari? That's funny, because she doesn't... I mean, I guess it's possible she's just using the name Grace Jabbari here. But is she calling her Gracie? No, the only I see is from the last name. She's not calling her Gracie here. But who knows? And it's not for an SEO benefit, right? Because it's Grace Jabbari with no spaces between it. So she's not just spelling it correctly. Who knows? But I guess we're going with Gracie. So, and one time Jonathan came to my house for dinner with Gracie. And how are him and Mr. Jabbari interacting when you saw them at dinner? Very in love, very close, finishing each other's sentences, very loving, very excited, to be with one another. Do you know approximately when that dinner was? I think it would have been, again, I was pregnant with Winter, so it would have been maybe only a month or two after the first time we had met. So she's saying early in the relationship. Without getting into the substance of any conversations, would Mr. Jabbari ever speak with you about the details of their relationship? Yes, and did you have an opportunity to spend time with Mr. Jabbari through the course of her relationship with the defendant? Yes. How frequently did you see her throughout the course of their relationship? A lot, because we were working together. What, if any, changes did you notice as the relationship progressed with Mr. Jabbari? I would say the first few months were great, and then, over time, I would say she lost a lot of weight. It was the first thing I noticed. She became thinner, and she saw her friends a lot less. Can you explain what you mean by that? She's very... Objection, Your Honor. This witness doesn't have personal knowledge of that. The judge says, were you one of the friends she saw a lot less? So Holly's like, sorry? The judge says, just ask her about her relationship with Miss Blakey and whether or not she saw Miss Blakey a lot less. The objection is sustained. Blakey says, I understand. Just re-ask the question, thank you. So Galloway says, how did your relationship with Mr. Jabbari change over time? I'm not necessarily a part of Gracie's friendship group. It's sort of separate. I love her friends, but more just we have our own relationship, which has mostly been guided by our working relationship, and so I definitely saw her a lot. I saw her a lot because we were working together, and sometimes she might come and help me with kids after rehearsal, things like that, so I still saw her, I would say. So let's put a pin in this right here. If you're saying that you mostly see someone while they're working, and then we also know that that same person, Grace, is working a lot less and planning her schedule around her romantic partner, whatever his schedule is, she's planning her schedule. We know that when she went over to New York, she said she wasn't working because she didn't have her visa. So if you see someone mostly because of work and that person stops working, what could be the reason that you see less of each other? Just on the surface there, just to consider. This is without getting into, I'm having kids and she's wanting to do other things. Just purely if you but if you've already iterated that you mostly saw each other because of work. That's her testimony. Yeah, we were personal friends, but we mostly saw each other during work. If Grace Jabbari stops working as much for whatever reason, it would follow logically that you're going to see her less because that's when you're saying you see her, right? So put a pin in that. And then, just for reference, if you do go and look at the Instagrams, there's some other work. You can see Grace Jabbari's in this video here. Gracie and Follow in Rehearsal, Turn and Pump, 25 weeks ago. So this is back on July 28th, 2023. So, Grace after the March 25th stuff got back in touch and was doing work again with Holly Blakey. They have some other photos. I believe Grace was part of this back in the spring before everything happened. So, I don't know. I have some questions because if we were to go to Grace Jabbari, and some of her photos, it does look like she uses photos, she brings them back forward after, they've been posted for a while. But let's say this is February 21st, 2023. This is the weight that Grace Jabbari has. Holly Blakey is saying, oh, she lost a lot of weight. And that's something Ben Totty is also going to mention in his testimony. But if we go back and explore some other things, 2020, Grace Jabbari is very thin to me here. I don't know if Instagram is kind of weird about zooming in. But when I hear stuff like that, Ben Totty is going to say, she seems like half the person she was. Does it really look like she's that skinnier here in 2020, which would have been before her and Jonathan were dating, versus a more current picture that it looks the same to me. So it's just weird that right away Holly Blakey seems to be wanting to get the vision out there to the jury. Yeah, something must have changed in the relationship because she lost a lot of weight. Well, if we look comparatively to times where you were already friends with her, she looks the same weight before she met Jonathan. But I'm going to hop over here. Let's look at some comments quick. I'm so sorry. So Tracker, you're dealing with traffic jams and flying. So all my sympathy to you. Yeah, so Daisy, right? So Daisy says she didn't say it was nerve-wracking, so why would he put those words on her? And maybe she did, but even if she said something like that, before she gets on the stand, she's on the stand, she's being sworn in or whatever. Now she's being instructed. The jury's there listening, so the jury's going to hear this nerve-wracking. Why, if someone tells me it's nerve-wracking, I'm thinking of, the type of witness that has to testify in a murder trial, like a gang trial, and they're scared to testify. That's why I think something would be nerve-wracking. Not just nervous, not just, new and unfamiliar, but nerve-wracking to me implies something a little bit more egregious or risky to be willing to do. So that's a weird implication for the judge to put in the air, but... And then Ernest, yeah, that's a good point. So if you guys see pinned in the chat, there is a link to AV in the Seventh Powers channel. She's great. I've lurked on her channel in the comments, but mostly I know her from being on the lead attorney's channel. She's a co-host pretty often with him, but she also has her own channel. If you were, let's see, about a week ago, I think it was last week. I don't think it was this Tuesday, was it? Oh my God, it was only 3 days ago. So 3 days ago, she wanted to take a look at the Jonathan Majors trial. A bunch of us hopped in the chat and she was blind reacting. And at first, she only had the stuff that was very public knowledge. And as she's going through, she's like, wait a minute. This is crazy. I got to look into this more. So she's been looking at the transcripts for the last couple of days since then. And she streams live at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She invited me to come on tonight, this evening, to be a guest on her stream. And we're probably going to talk more about these transcripts. AV does great coverage. She's very entertaining. She's very candid with her own opinions, but she's also non-judgmental. So I just like her in general as a creator. She's a great co-host with the lead attorney. Totally suggest you guys hop over to her. I don't have my screen shared. Anyway, the link to her channel is pinned in the chat. But even if you can't tune in tonight, come watch it on replay and check out some of her other stuff. She does a lot of good coverage on other interesting cases, so there's plenty there for you. And then, yeah, so Denise, so the Messenger actually did an article on that post, and the Messenger, I think it was Elizabeth Rosner, described it as, let me get back to Holly Blakey's page. The Messenger described it as it looking like Grace, her head between her own legs. Because if you look, this does kind of look like ripped jeans, like the ankle of ripped jeans down here in, I'm so bad at this struggle streaming. Down here in this corner, it's probably small on your screen, but there's a fray there. And then there's a seam here that kind of looks like denim jeans. So, but yeah, who knows? Those 2 years were a blur for most of us talking about COVID. And I agree. Hearing Gracie as the name, it seems like something to make her more human and sympathetic. And I'm not saying that she never called her Gracie, but if you're trying to right away put it out in the air without being directly asked, oh, she was looking thinner once the relationship progressed. Now I'm questioning if you're going up on that stand with a picture to paint in mind, and then you get right off the stand and go and post this picture supporting your friend on Instagram. Yeah, which that's fine. You know, you're allowed to support your friends even if you have to testify for them. But I get to make a judgment on how I think that impacts your credibility. And then Daisy says, how is she close to her but not a part of her friendship group? And I think part of that is, you know, maybe it's just mostly a work thing. They probably see each other when they are working. They probably do see each other a lot. Things that have rehearsals, I mean, that's hours a day. So around the time of a show performance, that's a lot of time you probably are spending together. You're probably sick of each other by the time you're done rehearsing. But at the same time, another part of my brain wants to know, you know, rather than say, hey, I have 2 kids and I'm not really into the drinking and partying, which Grace Jabbari seems to love to do. She loves to go to these festivals. She loves to go to the pub. She loves to explore bars that are open later in New York City, like the bar behind Walters that she recommends to Jonathan because she'd already gone there on her own with a friend to drink. You know, maybe this is Holly's way of saying, hey, we're part of different friend circles, and it's mostly because of work, so she doesn't have to come out and say, I don't drink like that. I don't party like that. That's just not me. And that's Grace. She has that half of her friendship in another place, separate from me. But she doesn't have to come out and say that in front of the jury. So, just a question. And then, yeah, so Tracker right along in theme with that. So that was before Gracie showed what a pill-popping alcoholic she actually was. Let's see. You guys are like sleuths over here. So let me jump back over to this and then we'll go through some more comments, but okay, so where was I? So how did your relationship with Miss Jabbari change over time? I'm not necessarily a part of Gracie's friendship group. It's sort of separate. I love her friends, but more just we have our own relationship, which has mostly been guided by our working relationship. And so I definitely saw her a lot. I saw her a lot because we were working together, and sometimes she might come and help me with the kids after rehearsal, things like that. So I still saw her, I would say. Did you notice? So another thing worth noting there, she might come and help me with the kids after rehearsal. They're already hanging out, rehearsal's over, I'll just come back to your place. To me, that suggests, you know, Holly's not, again, the type outwardly to go out, leave the kids at home, go partake in the things that Grace and her pub friends do. But when they do get to see each other, it's probably a much more, you know, friendly, closed environment, probably not centered around partying. Did you notice any change or withdrawn? Did you observe any changes in Miss Jabbari's demeanor throughout the course of the relationship? I remember that she would be in the house a lot more, for example, where they lived, going out less, working less, seeming to have less interest in herself. Could you explain what you mean by that? She was working a lot less, and she's someone who is very driven and has a lot of energy for life, and I think I saw a lot of that disappear. When you said she was going out less, was she going out less with you? We weren't really going out at all. Objection, Your Honor. This witness clearly has no personal knowledge. Sustained. Good job, Judge. And good job, Zuckerman, for sometimes that type of objection I think can slip by, but that's a good one to call out. I also think it's good for the jury to hear it. We weren't really going out at all. The jury didn't seem to click on everything, but me reading that, yeah, you didn't really go out at all. You have no personal knowledge, but yet here you are speculating that, trying to sow the seeds that this girl was isolated on purpose by her abusive boyfriend. That's how I'm taking this. Directing your attention to the day of... So Galloway doesn't even want to revisit that question. Directing your attention to the day of March 25th, 2023, do you remember where you were? Yes, I was at home. And you said home as in London area? Home as in London, in Camden, yeah. What were your plans for that morning? I had been walking my kids. I can go, yeah? You could. I had been walking my kids. I took our son to a birthday party, and I took Winter, the little one, home to have lunch and nap her. What happened next? I always do the same thing, so I remember I did her lunch at 11:30, presumably that means the baby's lunch, and went downstairs to change her and get her ready for a nap, which is around 12. We live upside down, so the bedrooms are downstairs and the kitchen is upstairs, if that makes sense of it, and I changed Winter, and I had some missed calls, and then text messages from Gracie saying, "Can you call me, please?" And what time, approximately, did you first notice those messages, just as a point of clarity? 12 midday, London time. And what did you do after receiving those messages? I text Gracie back saying something like, "Can't talk, I'm struggling with Winter," or something like that. And I said if it's urgent, say yes, and I'll be there. And I wonder if they're going to introduce these exhibits. But then it was at that point I realized if it was 12 in London, it must have been like 7 or 8 a.m. in New York. And then it kind of flagged to me something must not be right. And what did you do after realizing that? I changed Winter and put her straight in her crib for her nap, and I went upstairs and I called Gracie before she had time to message me back even. I did it quickly. So, hold on. Because Grace seems like a pretty fast texter, and a pretty fast caller. So... And yeah, I'm pretty sure that means 7, right? Because 5 hours would be the time difference, maybe. I know sometimes it's like a 6-hour difference between parts of UK and Eastern time zone. But she changes the diaper, goes downstairs to put the baby asleep downstairs, goes back upstairs, and then calls Gracie, before she had time to message me back even. Before she had time to message me back... Or was she trying not to message you back, and she moved on to try to see if someone else would talk to her? Because remember, we don't have all of the text messages or call logs from that night. They never even looked at the second phone that Grace Jabbari has to look at the phone records. So, I think this is pretty vague here. But anyway, approximately how long after seeing that text did it take you to put her to bed? Less than 10 minutes. So now we're getting... Less than 10 minutes is a very broad thing when you just said, I called her before she had time to text me back. To me, that implies it was such a panic-filled emergency. You read that text message, dropped the baby on the ground, and then dialed that girl up. But now it's less than 10 minutes. Did there come a time when you were able to speak with Miss Jabbari? Yes, she answered the phone. And did she speak with you about an incident with the defendant? Yes. Did she speak with you about injuries? Yes. Approximately how long was that conversation? I was on the phone, on and off the phone, to Gracie for hours. Hours and hours, actually. How long the first conversation was, I can't remember specifically, but I was calling her every 10 to 20 minutes for quite a lot of hours. I know you said there were multiple phone calls, so going to the first call, without getting into the substance of the conversation, can you explain what Miss Jabbari's tone of voice was? She sounded like I've never heard her before. Very quite quiet, quite wrecked. She sounded like she was in shock and very upset. She was crying. Now keep in mind, if this is 7 a.m., this is like 6 hours after anything presumably would have happened. She'd already met the strangers by like 12:54 in the morning a.m. Eastern time. The second car part happens just around 1 a.m. Then she goes to the club and she goes home around 3 a.m. But now she sounds like she's in shock and she's crying and she's upset. And meanwhile, we have all this testimony from Grace Jabbari that she didn't feel any pain or anything because she was in shock and had adrenaline all this time. But that around 7 a.m., she finally felt the pain because the shock and adrenaline was wearing off. And then Holly's like, yeah, around 7 a.m., she clearly sounds shocked. Like, this doesn't make sense. Anyway, have you ever observed Miss Jabbari like that previously? Never previously, no. Well, if you only hang out in a work capacity and then when she's at your house, and Jonathan has only been to your house for like one dinner, how would you know how she acts when she's had like 9 drinks and got broken up with? And if she was always getting broken up with, and she was always getting abused, wouldn't she have acted like this more than once? This doesn't make sense. I think she thinks it makes Jabbari sound like a victim of something. I think she thinks it adds credibility to what she thinks happened to Grace Jabbari. She might genuinely believe this happened to her friend Gracie. But it doesn't match Grace's testimony. It doesn't match if this was a pattern, that she only acted like this one time. If he was abusing her for the 2 years that they were together. It doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. So, she sounded like I've never heard her before. Very quite quiet, quite wrecked. She sounded like she was in shock and very upset. She was crying. Have you ever observed Miss Jabbari like that previously? Never previously, no. You said she was crying. Were you able to understand what she was telling you? Yes. It was a coherent conversation. And can you explain how, if at all, Miss Jabbari's demeanor on the phone, or better, tone, changed throughout the phone call? Her tone didn't really change throughout the phone call. And, I mean, not necessarily. She was very upset at first, but, like I said, it was a lot of hours of being on the phone, and I think further toward the end, around sort of 3 or 4, when I managed to kind of persuade her to get up and try to get out of the house. So, 3 or 4, that's approaching 10 a.m.-ish, 11 a.m.-ish. When I managed to kind of persuade her to get up and try to get out of the house. But that's the same time period that she says she either one, took a nice warm nap on the bathroom floor and then woke up to cops being there, or when she passed out and fell unconscious and then woke up to the cops being there. But Holly's like, yeah, that's around the time I kind of persuaded her to get up and try to get out of the house. Zuckerman, objection, Your Honor. That will be sustained as not responsive. The last answer will be stricken. I think, I'm sure the jury wasn't sitting there like piecing this together. But I'm glad she said that because it makes it all sound dumb and unbelievable. Why do you have to convince her to get up if she started to pack? She was down already. And again, 3 to 4 as an estimate, and it sucks because they have these phone records, but I don't think they're going to publish them here. But they could have. There could be clarity here. We get these random-ass September 2022 text messages come in, but yet we can't get the text messages and the timestamps for something where we're getting time testimony for. But, in any case, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. when I managed to kind of persuade her to get up and try to get out of the house. So all this time, she was just laying down this whole time boohoo crying on the phone with you. But we heard from her testimony, she took a quick nap, then got up, then she resolved to start packing, then she got tired again and wanted to take a nap on the floor, and then she just woke up to cops being there. Like, this all makes Grace Jabbari's version of events sound stupid. So they strike that. And the first phone call, was there any difficulty hearing what she was saying? No. Was she responsive to your questions? Yeah. Have you ever previously been around Miss Jabbari when she's injured? Yes. And what if any differences were present on March 25th? to the previous times I've seen her when she's injured or something? Yes. It's been more in the dancing context. She's danced with injuries, bad injuries, broken rib. So what does this sound like? This sounds like someone who knows what Grace Jabbari testified to. And then she's testifying. So, I mean, I guess maybe she knows. Maybe she's familiar with this. I guess she would have personal knowledge. But I'm also questioning, it's like that ice cube thing, like someone sowed the seeds of things that you're supposed to say while you testify. And so, in a way, it was just just an entirely different emotional landscape. It was different. Can you explain what you mean by that? Meaning that she was she sounded very broken, very traumatized person. Objection, Your Honor, move to strike. No, that will stand. That was her recollection of the voice. Okay, that answer will stand. And could you explain to what you referred? Yeah, so she's traumatized at what point in the night? At what point in the night does she finally sound traumatized? And could you explain to what you referred to with a broken rib? First, were you present for that? Listen, I don't want to say anything that isn't perfect memory, but I am pretty sure it was one of my shows where she had a fractured rib that she danced in, yeah. And in your experience, what did you mean by the fact that she sounded traumatized? Can you explain what that means in tone of voice? Objection, sustained. What, if anything, did Ms. Jabbari do while on the phone with you in the first call? Objection, sustained. What happened during the first phone call? She told me that they had been in a fight. Sustained. That last answer will be because this is hearsay. That's why this is an issue here. And the judge kind of saw that coming, because what did Ms. Jabbari do while on the phone with you in the first place? You know, the obvious answer that's going to be elicited is, well, she told me that, or she said that. So Priya quickly objected. It was sustained. The sustained this other thing that was going to be hearsay. She told me that they had been in a fight. Sustained. That last answer will be stricken from the record. Sorry. Go ahead. A different question. Approximately what time do you remember first receiving these messages? 12. And that is in the United Kingdom? Yes. I'm showing you what is in evidence as People's Exhibit 14. Your Honor, this isn't the exhibit that she's asking about. These are in evidence, but these aren't the first messages. These are the next set, just so we're clear. I haven't asked about the exhibit yet. But these are in evidence? That's correct, but the question was the first messages. All right. Just to be clear as to, yes. So, now, we saw kind of the same thing happen on Redirect where Galloway couches the September 2022 text messages in between two questions about March 25th injuries. And then, Priya jumped on this right here, appropriately so, but approximately what time do you remember first receiving these messages? 12, and that's in the UK? Yes. I'm showing you what's in evidence as Exhibit 14. It was going to make the jury think that this is the first outcry. Whatever this text message she's about to read, it would have, a reasonable person on the jury could have assumed it was the first thing that Grace Jabbari says. It's just sneaky. I get mad reading some of this stuff. So they show People's 14 in evidence to the witness. Miss Jabbari, Miss Jabbari? I guess it's supposed to be Miss Blakey. Miss Jabbari, what is People's Exhibit 14? Sorry? What is People's Exhibit 14? What you're holding? What is this? This is a photo. 2 photos of Gracie. Miss Jabbari's hand and the back of her ear. Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the photographs that you received? This is exactly what I received whilst I was on the phone to her. And there was another photo as well. Okay, and you stated that you spoke multiple times? Yes. Approximately how much time, to your memory, had passed after you spoke with her the first time? I'm sorry, let me pull this comment down. I've had it sitting there. I'm a struggle streamer. This is exactly what I received. Oh, okay, and you stated that you spoke multiple times? Yes. Approximately how much time, to your memory, had passed after you spoke with her the first time? How much time had passed? 20 minutes. And why did you call her again? Because I was... Objection, that's sustained. Rephrase it, maybe lead it a little bit. Yeah. All right, so we get to lead the witness on direct examination. We get to lead our own witness with the judge's suggestion. Did you call Miss Jabbari again? I was calling her every 20 minutes. Didn't she say 10 earlier? I mean, whatever. I'm not good with times either. I was calling her every 20 minutes to try and get her to get out of the apartment. Okay, so that's the recurring theme that Holly's going to keep saying in her testimony. And why did you want her to get out of the apartment? Objection, sustained. Miss Blakey, do you remember the time that you texted? Did there come a time when you texted Miss Jabbari again after she sent you those photographs? Yes. Do you remember approximately what time that was? I was messaging her constantly. If I had my phone, I could, but I was messaging her constantly. Would text message screenshots refresh your recollection? Yes, please. Handing to the witness. Miss Blakey, what we're going to do is you're going to be shown documents. Just look at them. When you see those documents, just look at them, read them to yourself, and see if they refresh your recollection. Okay. So I can see here that objection, that's all right. Just when you read all of them to yourself, if it refreshes your recollection, just tell us yes, and then you'll be asked another question. Okay, ask me the question. Does it refresh your recollection? Yes. Approximately what time did you send the text messages, if you did? I was on the phone to her. She sent me the photographs. I would have stayed on the phone to her for quite a long time. Objection, non-responsive, overruled. Go ahead, you can answer that. Then I called her again. Wait. Is there anything that would refresh your recollection as to when you called her again? I mean, it doesn't say on here about my calling her, but I was calling her all the time. But I could see I'm messaging her all the time as well. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this correct. No, it's fine. Did you tell anyone that you had received these photographs of Miss Jabbari? Objection, sustained, because that would have been hearsay. Because asking if she told someone. To your understanding, where was Miss Jabbari located when she took these photographs? Objection, if you know. In bed, because I could see the duvet. And approximately, I know you might not know, but approximately how many times did you speak with Miss Jabbari over the course of the morning? I was on the phone to her constantly, and I would leave gaps of 20 to 30 minutes over about, now we're going from 10 minutes to 20 to 30 minutes, over about 4 to 5 hours. What was your emotional state during that 4 to 5 hour period? Objection, sustained. Was Miss Jabbari responding to these phone calls that you were, yes, sending? And when you spoke with her, what was her tone of voice throughout the day? Her tone of voice was, objection, when, the judge says, throughout the day. Shelter says, correct, Your Honor, but there is a giant gap. The judge says, are you asking, did it change? Did the tone of voice change throughout the day? Yes. If you could ask it that way. So Galloway says, absolutely. Judge is like, thank you. Did Miss Jabbari's tone of voice change throughout the day? I would say maybe later in the day. She was packing her things. Objection. So she was packing her things. Where was the suitcase, guys? Grace Jabbari testified she locked herself in the bedroom to start packing and passes out. Suitcase is on the first floor, 2 floors below her. The suitcase she somehow will end up hearing, supposedly, she claims, Jonathan Majors tripping over. So, Holly, early in her testimony, I mean, if Holly doesn't realize she got played by Grace Jabbari, which she clearly didn't if she went and posted this right after, Holly starts saying, like, around 11 o'clock, I finally convince her, 10, 11 o'clock, I finally convince her to get up because she needs to leave this apartment. But then she's saying here, later in the day, she was packing her things. What do you mean she was packing her things when at the very end of all of this, that's when she decides to get up? And then Grace Jabbari tells us herself, the idea of starting to pack, the very idea of her starting to pack was so exhausting, she just went and laid on the bathroom floor. Not the closet, but the bathroom floor, which was really the closet floor. So, I'm not saying that Holly is telling an untruth here. I think she thinks she's being truthful and doesn't realize that it's not what actually happened that night. When was Grace Jabbari packing her things if she was locked in the bedroom, wouldn't get up, then was passed out because the thought of starting to pack was too much for her to handle? Why does Holly think she was packing? Objection. That's not responsive, so just ask the question again. Just ask to the voice. No, just let her ask the question. So, Miss Galloway says, did Miss Jabbari's tone of voice change in the phone calls compared to when you first spoke with her and when you spoke with her later? A small amount. Can you explain what you mean by that? She potentially had a bit more get up and go towards the end of the conversation. Could you explain what you mean by that phrase to the members of the jury? It took me a very long time to persuade her. Objection. And then the judge. I know this is hard, but just the tone of voice, just describe that as it goes on. That's sustained. Describe the tone of her voice over how it changed from extremely crying to not extremely crying. So she was extremely crying in traumatic around like whatever. What time would that be? Like 7 and 8, she said. And then now it changed a small amount by 10 and 11. But I thought she went out to the club and felt empowered and happy and whatever at 3 in the morning. So describe the tone of her voice over how it changed from extremely crying to not extremely crying. Galloway says, thank you. Holly says, yeah. Did there come a time when Miss Jabbari stopped responding to your messages? No, not really. So Miss Jabbari continued to speak with you throughout the day. Yes. So that would be from 7 to 8 to 10 to 11. And we have a timestamp. We know that 11:07 was one of those timestamps. And I think we have from Grace Jabbari's testimony, she texted Holly Blakey at like 7:58 a.m. So 7:58 a.m. It could be a few minutes off, but I know it was within like a 10-minute window of that. Because she had just texted those last 3 text messages to Jonathan Majors, with the final one being, there's no note, just you knowing what happened. And then within less than, I think it was like 6 minutes, a 6-minute difference, she texts Holly Blakey. So that was around 8 a.m. And we know we have an 11:07 a.m. text message to Holly Blakey from Grace Jabbari. That's the time frame. So presumably Grace Jabbari wasn't passed out or asleep at any point during 8 to 11:07, because Holly is saying I was talking to her constantly. So what, if anything, did you do in response to reviewing additional messages from Miss Jabbari? Objection, sustained. Were you able to, because she can't come out and say what she said to Grace unless they show the text messages. She can't just testify to something and not show the text messages. Were you able to understand what Miss Jabbari was telling you on the phone? Objection, asked and answered. Overruled. Would you repeat the question? Yes. Were you able to understand what Miss Jabbari was telling you when you were on the phone with her? Yes. Nothing further. So that's all Galloway wants to get out of Holly. So Chaudhry, the judge says, all right, Miss Chaudhry, I'm sorry. One of our jurors, or several of our jurors, need a bathroom break. Okay, all right. So members of the jury, what we'll do, you're excused for a few moments. One of the members of the jury needs a bathroom break, but you're not to discuss your testimony with anybody, okay? Thank you. Witness exits. Yeah, I wish the witnesses were instructed that they shouldn't look at testimony or talk about testimony or research testimony in this case. So they take their bathroom break. They come back in. Holly enters again. Chaudhry says, may I approach? So they have a sidebar at the bench. No transcription of that. Okay, so they're going to plan lunch and stuff. They're going to do a break. All of the instructions that I gave you are still in effect. Obviously, do not discuss the case among yourselves with anybody else. Okay, so Chaudhry doesn't think she'll be that long, but the judge decides that they better take their lunch break. Interesting. If anybody does seek to approach you to discuss the case, notify our officers immediately and do not read any press accounts about the case. And lastly, do not make any determination about the case until you've heard all the evidence, including the summations and my charge, okay? We'll break for a few moments. Interesting. I wonder what Chaudhry... Maybe it was just about timing of breaks, but maybe Chaudhry was like, I'll be quick, but can we take a break first? Because I want to look into something. Because this, we've never seen, I could have read through it and just glossed over it while I was reading on a stream. You know, sometimes I don't pay attention to, I'm reading something out loud and maybe my brain doesn't track, but maybe Chaudhry mentioned something about somebody knowing or being aware of testimony or things outside of the trial that they should or should not be aware of. Because I don't think I've ever seen the judge just randomly offer this instruction before. So, let me catch up before we get back from this break. It's okay, Juanita. It's Holly. You pretty much mostly missed. Right after Holly got done testifying, she went and posted a picture of Grace Jabbari on Instagram. The caption's her name. Ben Totty liked it with a bunch of hearts. And it seems like she was being very generous and trying to say certain things that would look favorable to her friend Grace. Although, to be fair, it does seem like she believes Grace's version of events. So I don't want to say that Holly Blakey's doing anything malicious. I think she got hit with the okie doke by a friend that happens to be a liar. She got played. Well, let's see. So and then Tracker's like, none of this makes sense, Kat. That's the whole point of you reading all of this. I know, but you know what? When I got these transcripts, part of me was like, there's got to be something I'm missing. Why? And I do think the harassment law is confusing. And if you look, Kevin Porter just took a plea deal for third-degree assault, reckless, and second-degree harassment. Do those two charges sound familiar? It's the same district. It's the same DA. He was initially offered a terrible plea deal where he was supposed to plead guilty to, I think one of it was still involved, the strangulation, like that with intent. Something much more egregious. He could never say that. Kaiser Gondrzic got out and said it was a shit of a plea deal. But he ended up pleading out after he said he wanted to take it to trial. It's my best guess that he's worked something out with the NBA. He knows his career can be back on track with the terms of the plea deal that he accepted. So it was a risk versus reward type of decision. I think it's also possible he could have seen Jonathan Majors took this all to trial, spent all this time, his career and his status, his reputation was put on hold and put in limbo for months, just for it to still be going on, because Jonathan Majors' case isn't closed. It's still in appeal. Kevin Porter Jr. could have seen, this man who has a video of him running away from this girl on the street. Jury still stuck him with these two stupid charges. So why would I go to trial and try to risk all the time and money to fight this, especially if I know I can end this chapter now, get back, play ball again. But yeah, so there was a part of me that thought if I got these transcripts, something about it would make sense. The only thing I can think of is the jury saw injuries and just felt like they needed to say, like, hey, there are clearly injuries here. They had to have been caused somehow. Give him these two stupid charges. Because the harassment one, they asked the language. What does this mean? They asked it to be, reread to them and explained to them more than one time. And we just saw Kevin Porter Jr. plea to that same charge. Probably because you look at it and you go, it's a hard charge. It's a violation. The harassment charge is just a violation. But the language of it is so hard to not apply to somebody. It's like following, or it's like such simple language that almost anything that if you're in close proximity to someone, they could say, hey, they harassed me. And by the way this is written, a jury could be like, well, the language says if you follow or push someone, it's harassment. There's no clarification there that even if you're doing it to get away from someone and to escape someone, it just says pushing, following. Actually, in the Jonathan Majors trial, the following language was not part of the jury instructions, from what I'm aware of. So they removed that part, which is interesting because the video shows Jonathan was the one being followed, aka harassed. But yeah, so part of me still wants to believe that the jury just saw injuries and thought they had to. It was unclear. I'm glad they didn't see that, hey, he intentionally hurt her finger. He's not to blame for that. I'm glad they at least saw that. I think the law needs to be revisited. I think they need some further adjudication on it. I think it'll be awesome if whatever happens with Jonathan Majors' appeal brings the language of those charges into question, because I imagine there are people out there that are getting stuck with that same charge that don't have people like us on the internet scratching our heads trying to advocate for them. But the other part of me is like, maybe these jurors just sucked and didn't like Jonathan from the second they saw him. Yeah, it would have helped jog her memory of the timeline, the phone logs. And she even says, so Holly says in her testimony, I can look at my phone. So it's not like they don't have the logs. Holly's like, I could look at my own. But yeah, if they had given the timestamps, that would have shut down the whole case. Now, guys, if you are tuning into this and you didn't see any of us talk about the timeline from when Elon Rispoli testifies, now I don't have that day of transcripts. It might have, I think it was a different court reporter in the courtroom that day. But Elon Rispoli is a manager for Jonathan Majors. He was on the phone with Jonathan Majors. He says Jonathan Majors knocked 70 to 80 times banging, and he bangs on the witness stand really loudly to demonstrate how he was banging and yelling for Grace Jabbari's name. And he creates this timestamp, like starting with 10:45 while Jonathan Majors was on the way up to the apartment, banging on the door, getting the handyman to come in. At about 11:10, he gets inside, finds Grace is passed out on the bathroom. He's still on the phone with Elon Rispoli at this time, but then he gets off the phone to call 911. That is time-stamped for 11:13 in the morning, and the cops arrive to the lobby at 11:17 and some seconds added in. So 4-minute difference. But we have a text message that Grace Jabbari sends to to Holly Blakey at 11:07 a.m. So this whole theme of, well, I fell asleep and I was unconscious, I passed out, and I don't know anything that happened until I woke up with cops standing over me. I don't remember Jonathan Majors coming home. Not true. So that's when Tracker's mentioning timestamps here. Elon Rispoli got some of that in. And I wish it was enough for people to understand that Grace Jabbari, as far as all evidence suggests to me, lied about this whole scenario. Nap after puking in bed with no panties. Yeah, so I did just send the final leg of my FOIL request for the state for Manhattan DA. That's hitting the mail today. It's so archaic. It's like a paper trail. But they did say that exhibits 1 through 19 will come my way. A lot of that you guys may have seen. I think there's only like 3 or 4 in there that I'm not sure we've seen any of the media outlets release. And I'm presuming that they're probably pictures, like pictures of, maybe the x-ray of her finger when the doctor was testifying. But whatever it is, as soon as I get them, I'll upload them. I've been requesting this information since, I think, December 19th or 20th. And every 5 days I would get an automated email from the Manhattan DA, like, oh, we're responding to your FOIL request, 5 more days. And then finally, they said, send us a check by snail mail. We'll return you digital files for exhibits 1 through 19. And they did mention that there are other exhibits that they cannot release at this time because the case is still active. So I'll repeat the request after any appellate decision. But it, at least to me, seems like there's more than the 19 exhibits that they will be producing to me. Once I get those, I don't expect it to be a quick turnaround, but, maybe 2 or 3 weeks from now, look for that. I'll post them. I'll create a Google Drive. But yeah, maybe some of these text messages will be in there. But let's see. So we're talking about her voice. You mean, did her voice change during the hangover? Yeah, like, I lose my voice just talking here. Can you imagine if I was calling and leaving voicemails to a boyfriend that just broke up with me and I was all upset, like, call me back, call me back. My voice would be 10 times worse than this. And I've been on here for 53 minutes. So, yes, for Holly to try to, kind of paint this picture or even convince herself, because I think she might believe it for real, that Grace Jabbari's voice and demeanor are changing for a reason that must look bad for Jonathan Majors, and for a reason that looks like Grace Jabbari's version of events is truthful and credible, doesn't really make sense. We know she was drinking. We know she was out at the club. You speak loudly at the club. Like, you gotta try to be heard. Your voice could be lost for so many reasons. And then Denise. So, hey, Denise. So Holly trying to get Grace to leave, but Holly didn't get it that Grace was not intending to leave. Exactly, because that suitcase was 2 stories down, and Grace Jabbari said she locked herself in the bedroom because she was scared. Yep, so Rosemary points it out. I just want to say that Grace locked herself into the room not to protect herself from him, but to pretty much to look like she killed herself. I agree. And then Daisy, yeah, it's so obvious what they did with Kevin Porter Jr., the same exact charges. And that's true. I should have added that context a few minutes ago. Kevin Porter Jr. was pretty much charged with the same initial charges. Jonathan Majors was slapped with 8 charges, and there was a story that he strangled somebody. Kevin Porter Jr., I think, was the same case, except one of his was felony level, because the strangulation in his, and they didn't drop the strangulation charge. it's not part of the plea, but if they went to trial, I think that was still sticking, even though Kaiser Gundrzik was like, no. But there was a felony charge as part of one of the counts because there was some fractured vertebrae rumor that never actually existed that the prosecution said in open court and then the media heard and it got pushed everywhere. So almost the same charges, like 8. Strangulation was this thing that never actually happened. And then the DA's like, oops, yep. And then as far as the appeal, I believe that they are appealing because Chaudhry said that they were going to. I looked at the New York State Court of Appeals website. They haven't updated anything that's since January 4th. So just because there's nothing listed on the site doesn't mean anything. New York courts are notoriously slow in general, I feel like, but also around December and January holiday backlog season. There's been no updates since January 4th, so if they filed anytime after January 4th, it wasn't going to be part of that update. When they do file the appeal, if they do, and I'm sure they will, currently the arguments are scheduled through April. So if they are to get an argument hearing scheduled right away, if the Court of Appeals agrees to hear this, the earliest it would be May. So, and probably not May. It'd probably be June, July. Appeals are a very slow process. It sucks. In the digital age, it sucks. From the court website, it looks like they hear appeal arguments 2 or 3 days a week, once a month. So if it even gets accepted for appeal at all, the calendar's going to push that way down the road. Rosemary says, Grace, she was very determined never to leave that apartment, and I think that she was shocked when she came in and he was not there. So she barricaded herself into the apartment. I mean, mentally, if you think about it, if we presume someone's upset and drunk and acting on instinct, they lock themselves in. Instinctively, that suggests what? You want to stay. There is no threat there because you can get out of those doors. He's not there. He's not answering his calls. You don't know where he is. But your instinct is to lock yourself in and stay put. If I go on strike and I chain myself to a tree, that means I want to stay and I want this tree to stay. Like, that doesn't mean I'm trying to get away from the tree if I'm going on strike and chaining myself to the tree. Like, the logic doesn't make sense. The common sense is not common sensing. And yeah, the jury wanted a quiet life. The mainstream media noise probably made them think they had to charge him. Isn't that sad? And I honestly think it can be helpful for some appeals. Looking at the Courtney Clenny case, and I'm not saying that I've changed my mind, I still think my initial stance was it should not take a Courtney Clenny situation to believe that men can be victims. I still feel the same way. But there's some interesting things going on, even though that's a Florida case. It's much more transparent in Florida, the way the courts work. Her hearings have been televised. Her trial is going to be televised. But there's still some interesting maneuvers that the prosecution is making that, to me, are meant to go and shape public opinion. So the day that they arrest her is when this elevator video comes out. If you're not familiar with the case, right when the news broke that she was finally arrested, it was August 11th, so it was several months after the April 3rd stabbing, the fatal stabbing of Christian Obumseli. She gets arrested finally. At first they were like, oh, it was self-defense, and then the prosecution said, well, we want to make sure we got the charge right. They only charged her with second-degree murder with a weapon. I think it's a smart charge because it doesn't require the state to prove that Courtney Clenny had intent to kill Christian Obumseli. I think they would have had a harder burden to prove their case if that was part of the charge. So kudos to the prosecution for being pretty wise with how they're choosing to charge. That's not what we saw with the Jonathan Majors or the Kevin Porter Jr. case, right? But in any case, they took months to actually arrest her. She was out, she was moving money, she was in Hawaii to receive therapy, both for PTSD and I believe substance abuse disorder. I'm not trying to misdiagnose her, but I believe that that's the two reasons she was getting therapy. Then they finally get this, they put they petition for an arrest warrant On August 4th, it's granted. On August 11th, Hawaii police get her. She waives her extradition. She comes back to South Florida, where she's been held in custody since. But on August 11th, this video of her swinging on Christian Obumseli in their apartment, they had a penthouse apartment with a private elevator floor. She's swinging at him in the elevator, and it's a short clip. And it looks horrible for her. It looks really horrible for her. But it came from the prosecution. And it came out the day that they arrested her. So, why do you need the public to see that for you to right alongside this arrest? The prosecution they bear the burden. They're supposed to pursue justice, right? And at the same time, there was a new video that came out where Courtney Clenny is screaming about Christian Obumseli maybe looking or speaking at someone, touching someone's breast while they're on vacation in Aspen, Colorado, about 6 weeks before the fatal stabbing. That video is being reported as being released by the attorneys representing his estate, who are suing Courtney Clenny and the building and related entities civilly. But that law firm came out and said, we weren't the ones that leaked that. The state prosecution leaked that. And then the defense attorney is saying that, hey, we went on court TV to do an interview to react to this video that got released. And then the state is filing for an order to show cause. They want to have a hearing to admonish us for doing this interview to react to this video that got leaked. So, and this was all in the last 2 weeks. So with the Courtney Clenny case, she could be guilty as hell, right? We don't even need to debate that right here. But for justice, if you have the prosecution coming in a high-profile case with a millionaire OnlyFans celebrity status type girl, you're leaking a video the day that you arrest this girl. And then months later, because this is like 2 years this case has been pushed back, and you leak another video, but then also want to admonish the defense for doing an interview to respond to that video you leaked. You're in Miami talking about a celebrity OnlyFans girl. How are you going to find an untainted jury pool? And it's not like you can't, if a jury pool is tainted, there can be exceptions to that if what they're seeing in the media is balanced. But if you as the prosecution are moving to restrict the defense from having any type of reaction to the things that you're leaking, now that jury tainting is clearly going to be imbalanced. So to me, I'm looking at that and I'm like, you charge this girl what I think is appropriately. You don't need to prove that she had intent to kill this man. You just have to prove that she did, in fact, she is the reason that he died. And there isn't another self-defense justification for it. Yet you're going and putting all this stuff out into the media and saying the defense can't respond to it. You're silencing the defense while you're talking to the media. You're creating an appellate issue before this trial even starts. Which means if this girl is convicted, if she's rightfully convicted, she has a really good grounds for an appeal just off what's going on in the media, what the prosecution is doing so far. And, like, that all has nothing to do with what's going to come out at trial or, you know, what the verdict is going to be. But what I'm saying is there's a good appellate issue already on the table. And, like, I just question why the prosecution, not just Florida with the Clenny case, but we see it with Majors, the Manhattan DA, why they have to go and play this game in the media. But yeah, so back to Juanita's point here. The mainstream media clearly made Jonathan Majors look guilty by misrepresenting facts. And I agree. And there was a lot of buzz from the media about how it was Chaudhry going to the media just for getting her motions to the court filed through, it was Yahoo was one of them, and Business Insider. And then the other stuff that she put out there was evidence from the Manhattan court. Like, but the prosecution is going out there and dropping these seeds of this. There was another incident. There was other accused. Like, come on. But yeah, it's crazy. And then Ernest, I agree. Jonathan needed a black male juror, but with 6, the odds were slim. And I have a problem with the 6, you know. Just because it's like a misdemeanor case doesn't mean that it's any better to have 6 people decide. I think 12 is a much better number, and I don't really care what the charges are. I think you're taking away someone's freedom, you're putting a badge on them for life. You should give them the benefit of having a better chance at a broader, diverse jury pool. Just my opinion. Back to the Florida case, I believe that will be 12. I think it's 12. And even though, so Clenny, it's life in prison is her max sentence. Minimum 16 years, max life in prison without parole. There's no death penalty on the table for her, but if you look at, is it the YNW Melly case? He's on a second trial. For the sentencing phase of the trial, if they find him guilty during the second trial, they'll also have a penalty phase. And 8 jurors, it will only take 8 of the 12 jurors to condemn that man to the death penalty. So even though there's 12 sitting there to deliberate on a verdict of guilt, it's only going to take 8 people out of 12 to say, well, we think he deserves the death penalty. So I think that's another crazy thing to look at. He's one of the first cases since Florida has made that change. That will be, I would hate to be that first example. I don't want to be that guinea pig. But it's another example where, great, Florida's great because they give you 12 people on a jury, but at the same time, a really serious sentence, they're saying, 8 is fine. Just 2/3 of the jury agreeing is fine to tell someone death penalty. So, crazy stuff. And then, yep, so the black juror, who was a woman, if you weren't familiar with Danny's coverage of the jury makeup, she was messing up a couple times according to Danny Does Law. So she was like nodding off, falling asleep, not paying attention. And I think they spoke to her about it the second week, not the first week. That could be an appellate issue. Probably not that compelling, though, to be honest. Yep, and Juanita Lucy's is under a hotel. It was like the sub-level that they were on. So she was not afraid. She was not afraid of Jonathan. She went back to get back with him. I agree. They worked backwards. So Ernest says, the system got the verdict it wanted, and with that verdict, it justified the arrest in the first place. Yep, and that's why you hear people fixated on the found him guilty, and we have to go out there and scream at the top of our lungs, to clarify of a reckless, third-degree assault, reckless, and harassment violation. But he was acquitted on the things that would suggest someone could have been abusive. The other 2 charges that he was acquitted of don't even mean someone was abusive. It doesn't even mean a pattern of abuse. The charge would have been for the one incident. But in any case, he was acquitted of them. But people are still like, oh, the verdict proved he's an abusive person, that he abused this girl. And that's the exact opposite of what the verdict actually did. But exactly what Ernest is saying here, the verdict still confirms, right? Like some confirmation bias. All that arrest hullabaloo that we heard, he strangled this girl, she was found passed out, he's abusive, 8 charges with multiple counts on each charge. He was found guilty. So people remember that first arrest story and then hear that he was found guilty. So they picture what they picture is what they think he was found guilty of. Like, it's just insane to me. So let's read this. So the witness comes back in. They had their break. We don't know why, but we had just seen that the judge actually gave this instruction saying, hey, if anybody does seek you to approach the case, notify your officers immediately and do not read any press accounts about the case. And lastly, do not make the determination about the case until you've heard all the evidence, including the summations and my charge. Okay, we'll break for a few minutes. So I really wonder if Chaudhry, and I would love to see the appeal, what's included in the filing. I broke down her motion to dismiss on my channel. There's a document, a link to the PDF in that video if you just want to read it. You don't want my commentary. But she didn't really miss any punches with her motion to dismiss. She pulled out a lot of different points, and I would love to see what her firm, her and Seth, and anybody else put together as far as points for an appeal. Because I bet we'll see something about this. You know, witnesses and or the jury being exposed to something that they shouldn't have been exposed to, either before deliberations or before they were set to testify. So, and then let's see. So all rise, the jury exits. Another discussion at the bench. Okay, so after this he gives this instruction before they go on the break. All rise, jury exiting, a discussion at the bench. Short recess was taken, all rise. So that instruction was before they leave. And then there's a meeting at the bench after the jury exits. So court officer says, be seated. Do both sides stipulate all jurors are present and properly seated? Yes and yes. All right, if we could bring the witness back. The witness enters, so Holly, they advise her she's still under oath. Thank you. And then Chaudhry approaches for cross-examination. Good afternoon, Miss Blakey. You and I have never met before, have we? No. Isn't it true that the district attorney's office has paid for your flights from England to New York in order to testify in this case? Yes. And they've also paid for a hotel for you? Yes. To stay in New York? Yes. And that they've also offered you a per diem to cover any meals or expenses here? Yes. I have to save some receipts, yes. And how many nights have you been staying for this? I've stayed 3 nights. And you are a close friend of Miss Jabbari, correct? Correct. You care about her, correct? Correct. And you've known her very well since 2015, correct? Yes. Chaudhry! And you are aware that Miss Jabbari drinks alcohol, correct? Objection. Judge says, I'll allow that question. Go ahead. Does she drink alcohol? Yes. Yes. You've seen her hungover, correct? Objection as to relevance. Sustained. Miss Blakey, that morning of March 25th, which was the afternoon in the UK, you testified on direct that it was a coherent conversation. Is that right? Yeah, it was a coherent conversation as we were talking on the phone. Yeah. And is that still your testimony that it was a coherent... Oh, are you trying to impeach her? And is that still your testimony that it was a coherent conversation? Yeah. Miss Blakey, isn't it true that on June 16th, you had a phone call with the district attorney's office, and on that phone call were Miss Galloway and a paralegal from their office, Layla Giatti? Did I have a phone call with them on June 16th? Yes. Yes. And I can't remember the date, but I'm sure it was. If you're saying so, that's correct. And isn't it true that during that phone call, you were discussing with the district attorney's office this exact conversation with Miss Jabbari on the morning of March 25th? Yes. And it was important for you to be accurate on that in that conversation, correct? Yes. So we have all these yeses. And you were accurate in that conversation, correct? To as much as I remember, yes. And then, so Juanita asked in the chat, did we get Officer Swain's transcripts? They're in the shared doc there. I haven't done a video about them. I haven't done Ryan Strick's or Officer Swain's, but they are in the Drive folder in the description if you want to go and read those. I've read Ryan Strick's testimony. I haven't read Swain's. I've read parts of it. I'm going to speed through that before I jump on with AV later tonight, just in case that comes up. But I think we had a decent amount of coverage on his testimony too from Danny, but it's still good to see his words in the transcript as they're being said and how the questions are being asked. But yeah, so here we have Holly Blakey. Yeah, yes. And you were accurate in that conversation, correct? To as much as I can remember, yes. And isn't it true that on that date, you said that Miss Jabbari was not making much sense on that phone call? What I meant was, Miss Blakey, did you say that or not? I said that. So then the witness asks, can I explain? What will happen is Miss Galloway, will be able to ask you questions afterwards. That's the truth. It's important I explain that. You'll be asked questions on it. You could ask that question again so you have the answer. Just answer this yes or no. Yes. Do you want to ask it again, Miss Chaudhry? Chaudhry says yes. Miss Blakey, isn't it true that during the phone call with the district attorney's office, while you were discussing your phone call with Miss Jabbari on the morning of March 25th, you said that she was not making much sense? Yes. In a wider context, yes. In a wider conversation. So the judge says, all right, so the answer is yes. Thank you, Judge. Chaudhry, and isn't it true that in that phone call, you told the district attorney's office that Miss Jabbari was half asleep? Is that right? At times? And isn't it also true that so half asleep sounds very different than traumatized and excitedly crying. Was that the word she used? Extremely crying. She said extremely crying and sounding traumatic. But now she told the district attorney's office that Jabbari sounded half asleep. And then now she's saying, at times. And isn't it also true that you described Miss Jabbari as hysterical? Is that right? I don't remember saying that. Miss Blakey, isn't it true that Miss Jabbari told you that there was blood on her pillow? Yes. And I'm referring again to the morning of March 25th. Is that right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you have... Yes. And isn't it true that Miss Jabbari told you that she had been really scrappy that night with Mr. Majors? She had said that. And isn't it also true that Miss Jabbari told you that she didn't know exactly how it happened? Yes. In that conversation with Miss Jabbari on the morning of March 25th, did she tell you how much she had drunk the night before? Objection, sustained. That technically would have been hearsay, right? How much did she tell you? In that conversation, Miss Jabbari did not mention to you that she had taken any sleeping pills, correct? Objection, sustained. It would have been hearsay again. Did she mention to you? Miss Blakey, so I don't want you guys to be like, oh, why is the judge sustaining all these questions? That's a hearsay. Because she only would have known if that's what Grace Jabbari had told her. Miss Blakey, you have testified about a number of phone calls that you had with Miss Jabbari on March 25th, correct? Nonverbal response. I'm assuming it was a nod, like yes. Chaudhry says, at any time did you look at your phone records to see the exact time and length of those calls? Galloway objects. The court asks, did you look at your phone records? I looked through my WhatsApp messages, not my phone call records. And then Chaudhry says, I passed the witness. Thank you. All right, Miss Galloway. Miss Blakey, what did you mean by Miss Jabbari wasn't making a lot of sense? I meant that her conversation was nonlinear, that at this time there was always a subservience, in a way, going on to Jonathan. Objection to the characterization, Judge. Move to strike. The last sentence will be stricken. Sorry. I meant the conversation was nonlinear. She was very emotional and upset. It doesn't have always a structure that normal conversation would have obtained. It doesn't have always a structure that normal conversation would have obtained. Can conversations obtain things? Is this like a British phrase? It seems like someone's using words really quickly to me, but maybe that's like a difference of dialect. It was all over the place. And on cross-examination, you were asked if Miss Jabbari told you that she didn't know exactly how her injuries had happened. Did Miss Jabbari tell you who had caused her injuries? She said, he had hurt me again. Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike. Just ask that again. That last answer will be stricken, but you could ask it. Miss Jabbari, withdrawn. Miss Blakey, did Miss Jabbari tell you who had caused her injuries on March 25th? I could rephrase it. Would that be helpful? Holly says, can you please? I'm just conscious of not answering incorrectly. You're completely fine. On March 25th, 2023, did Miss Jabbari tell you who had caused her injuries? Yes. And who was that person? Jonathan. Nothing further. Judge says okay. Chaudhry, no further questions. We thank you very much. You are now done as a witness. Thank you. So, there's that. And then, when she's done testifying, she goes and posts a picture of Grace Jabbari to her Instagram with Grace Jabbari's head between her legs. And then it says, Grace Jabbari, Grace Jabbari, Grace Jabbari, Grace Jabbari. And Ben Totty, even though he hasn't testified yet, comes over and likes this with a bunch of hearts. Down here. There's Ben Totty right there. I wonder if he posted anything. No, he looks like his Instagram's all about himself. So, there's that. And then there's some pictures. There's Grace in these that he's tagged in. There's Holly here. And remember, these are people that are part of his talent company, Box Artist Management. So, there's that. That is the Holly Blakey transcript testimony. I believe next up was Officer Swain. I do have those transcripts. I'll do a video. We'll read through them. We'll point out any inconsistencies. I think we've all gotten the main juice from Officer Swain, where he was just kind of like, oh, I don't remember if I said that or not. And he doesn't work for the county anymore. He now works in Suffolk County, Long Island. So as far as accountability for anything that he did incorrectly, he's got a new boss, new employer. Water under the bridge, right? So, but let's pull this off. Do you guys want me to leave the picture of Grace Jabbari's butt cheeks up while we read through the comments? We'll leave this one up. But let's see. So, okay, so Anita says, talking about how the media has covered the verdict. I've seen it in a lot of articles. The UK Mirror even said he was found guilty of beating up his girlfriend. Oh my god, that is not what he was found guilty of. That's so insane to me. if you're wondering why someone would go and do an interview before the appeal or sentencing, this is why. Because you have these articles out here saying that he's a beater. Like, honestly, I know in hindsight we could all sit here and be like, oh, you know, maybe he should have testified. I think he also had that thought and has that thought. I bet he has regrets about not testifying, because now, even though I think the testimony transcripts look bad, the people that are writing these articles and saying he beat up his girlfriend aren't the ones sitting there reading the transcript. And if they were, they're probably going to cherry pick like one word where, with that last redirect where, who caused the injuries? Jonathan Majors. They're not going to read the part where Chaudhry's like, are you not saying to the police right on this body cam audio that your finger injury happened in the second part of the car? Like, the part of the car where you admitted that you used your right hand to strike Jonathan Majors, ripping his coat jacket and buttons. Like, they're not going to look at that part of the transcript. But that's the British media for you. I mean, I don't think ours is any better. I surely don't think ours is any better. So what do we've got? We've got AV does her streams Tuesdays and Thursdays. Today's Thursday. I'll jump on with her tonight to talk about Jonathan Majors. She does have, if you want to see her blind react, like, she came into it not really knowing much, and then she's like, oh my god, transcripts, yeah, I can't wait to jump in. But she's an insightful person, and it was awesome. I didn't want to plant too many seeds while I was in this live chat. But it was awesome to see her be like, he was like chasing her or something, right? Wait, no, she was chasing him? Wait, how did this case even go to trial? So watching, and we've kind of all been through that, like, shock of some of the evidence once we see it. We see the evidence and we're like, how did we get this outcome? How did we get here? You can watch AV do that in real time by revisiting the stream she did 3 days ago. It was good. The live chat replays in there too, so you can watch some of us and some of her audience freak out in real time about how this case is so crazy. And then I think Juanita, do you mean Depp? I think the Mirror just wanted a Depp repeat case. And that's true. I mean, stories like that, they get clicks. They really do get clicks. And they just want that ad display revenue. They don't need people to... They could get a little bit more money if someone scrolls the page. But most of the ads are, you know, there's that pop-up ad that you have to close out of. And then there's the header ad. And there's the ads on the sidebar. They make that ad money from, you know, that first screen that's shown. Even if people don't read the article any further. There's not really much incentive for them to get people to read further. So. And then, hey Malik, how are you? You might be a little bit behind on the stream, or maybe you're watching it in real time. But we did just finish the reading of the Holly Blakey transcript. So rewind, be some replay crew. And then Wonder Woman, thanks for all your dedicated time, research, and insight during this case. Well, thank you, and thank everybody else for being here, because it makes me feel less crazy. I don't love the idea that I'll read a transcript and have such a blunt reaction to it, because I do try to take testimony in at face value before I have a knee-jerk reaction about it being credible or not. So sometimes when I have these knee-jerk reactions, like with Holly, I'm like, you got hit with the okie doke. This girl, Grace Jabbari, lied to you, and I think you fell for it, and I think you're out here trying to convince yourself that you weren't fooled. Why would you be fooled? You know better. So now you've got to plant your feet down to defend your own ego when someone boldly lied to you, and you had to come and testify for them on their behalf. And not just your friend, but also someone that helps your company make money, helps your freelance business make money. So yeah, and the Daily Mirror is a rag like many media. That's kind of how I look at it too. So I do have Officer Swain's testimony. I'll schedule a live. I'll try to give you guys a couple hours before I do that. We can read through that, poke the holes in it. When I get those exhibits, Exhibit 1 through 19, because I think this is Exhibit 14 we had today in the transcripts. Oh, great. There's going to be a 14 on every page. Okay, so Exhibit 14. So presumably if they're like going in order, I know that big compilation video was Exhibit 5. But I think with Officer Swain and the other officers and then the doctor, so I don't know if there'll really be anything new in this FOIL request when they turn it over, but maybe there will be. We'll also know that it's whole, that, you know, if we're looking at someone else's YouTube who's uploaded it, or TMZ with their watermarks on it, we can have it without all that stuff. But I do hope that one of these exhibits, 15 through 19, is the x-ray photo, because we know that the doctor was asked to point out where the injury was in the x-ray, and he was just like, oh, where the arrow is, and he couldn't actually fine-tune, specify where the fracture injury even was in her finger. He was just relying on the radiologist arrow that was on the x-ray. So I would love to see that. Would love to just have the exhibits as whole. When I get them, I'll share them with you guys. And then I haven't ordered any of the transcripts for the second week. There are a few that Casey was in the courtroom for, so it would be as much as me just ordering them from her and having her turn them around. The other days, I'd have to call the court and find out who the second court reporter was and what their contact information is. You guys can crowdsource on some of that and decide how important it is to get more transcripts. For me, I wanted to see Grace Jabbari, because that to me is, besides the driver, the key witness in this case. And then M. Haka says, thanks, Kat. As a Brit, I avoid the mirror. It's trash. Yeah, it always seems like they're like big on paparazzi photos too. Like just like someone walking out of their house and getting coffee without makeup. Like a big news story. And then The Guardian was getting in on it after Jonathan's interview with that abuser expert. The GMA interview? Abuser expert. I do a portrait of Jonathan Majors. Wanted to send you one. You can email just Kat, that's 2 T's in Kat, at Kat Wagner, Wagner. I can just put it in the chat. If you guys need to send me something. Don't expect like an instant reply. I was finally, like, all the work after traveling, I finally answered a bunch of unanswered emails today. So I'm pretty slow with email. So I get a ton for work, like my day job type stuff. But really anything you send there, I'll get to it at some point, hopefully within less than 7 days. But I'll see it because it's only me in that inbox. And then let's do that, guys. I hope if you guys can make it over to AV's stream. Again, her channel, she covers great topics anyway. I did do a deep dive into the Courtney Clenny case. I wasn't initially interested in covering it because I was pretty satisfied it's going to be streamed. You know, I don't have that type of impetus about transparency and media coverage because at least we can see it ourselves. But I got a little annoyed because I'm learning that the prosecution is releasing things that look really good for them against the defendant when they bear the burden and are supposed to pursue justice, fair trial. And then they're trying to stomp on the defense from being able to react to the things that they've leaked. That bothers me a little bit. I'm also kind of interested in it because I think the defense is going to make an argument of mutual abuse. And if you've hung around on Twitter long enough, X long enough, so you've heard someone say mutual abuse doesn't exist. But there's academics that say the theory of mutual abuse not existing is just a theory. And I think the defense, this is a major trial, is going to take a mutual abuse argument as the basis of the theory of their case. I think that's pretty interesting. And then there's also some text messages and timeline information. Courtney Clenny was asking for a restraining order on April 2nd that's timestamped on the body cam footage. And April 3rd is when the stabbing killed. She says in the video that he was hiding inside the couch, like the couch cushions, inside the hallway to her private penthouse apartment. The prosecution says it's a shared apartment. She, in the video, and also the defense, says it was her apartment, her name's on it. But whatever it is, it's a private penthouse. There's a hallway out of the elevator before you actually go into the penthouse. And there's a couch there that he was hiding inside of, according to her on this video where she's asking for a restraining order on April 2nd. And I haven't seen that go around and get as much coverage as the other videos that really look bad for her. But, you know, if the prosecution's going to leak the things that look bad for her, I feel like, just as a contrarian, I want to say, hey, but technically, if you guys see something coming up about this trial and why the defense is claiming she was afraid for her life on April 3rd, if we're going to discuss whether it's just something they're pulling out of their ass or if there's any evidence that they're going to be able to actually produce, one of the things that they are going to be able to produce is this body cam footage from the day before, where she's asking for a restraining order, saying he stalked her, she was afraid to go walk her dogs, he followed her while she was walking, and he was hiding in her couch cushions. And then the building staff is in that body cam video describing Christian Obumseli lunging at her in the common areas of the lobby of the building. Even though in the affidavit for the arrest, the prosecution says that the witness that is familiar with the building says that, yeah, the police were called 13 times since they were living there together. And we have witnesses that say she was the one that would even attack him in common areas of the lobby. Well, if there's a witness on body cam footage, which is something the police, that's the side of the prosecution at the end of the day. And then there's a witness, the building staff, on this footage saying he was the one, we witnessed him lunge at her in the common area. I think it's a bad look for the prosecution. I think it's going to poke holes in the credibility of the case they present. And the prosecution's job is to put forth a fair and just trial and appropriately charge people. I think Courtney Clenny can very well be found guilty of second-degree murder with a deadly weapon, and especially since they don't have to prove intent. But I think the prosecution's creating their own obstacle by being a little bit sneaky about the game they're playing in the media. I don't think they need to play a sneaky media game. I think that they can let people see all of it and not try to say, the defense, you can't go out in public and react to things that we're putting out there. I think they can win their case without having to do that. So I don't know why they're doing it. And I'm going to criticize them for doing it. Doesn't change my opinion that it shouldn't take a Courtney Clenny situation to believe that men can be victims. But I still think we should advocate for prosecutorial transparency, fair conduct, and if there's going to be a media game, both sides should be allowed to play it. Especially the defense should be allowed to play it, because the defendant is the person with rights that are protected by the Constitution, not the prosecution. So I have a whole deep dive just focusing on right before the Aspen video and some of her dating history. There's a rumor she broke Sean Roden's jaw, Courtney Clenny. I've traced that all the way through to the Aspen video, the elevator footage, text messages he was sending her, very long text messages on February 28th, where he's saying some interesting things that could make him look like an abuse victim or a manipulator. So I know both sides are going to offer their interpretation to the jury, all the way to April 2nd and April 3rd. It's about 3 hours, my raw recording. I'd probably trim it down to 2. If you guys are interested in seeing that, I'll get it edited and put it out there. It'll be pretty similar to my Jonathan Majors deep dive, except I don't feel like I don't want to advocate for Courtney Clenny. I don't think that she's innocent. I'm just curious about the coverage of it, really. That's my interest in the case. So you won't see me do much content on that, but I do have the deep dive if you guys are interested in the information. And then, so ask Dre or Chill to send it to you. I did this as a link between all those who support Jonathan in his fight. Okay, I have to hit up Chill because we're going to talk about Creed 3. I've never seen a Jonathan Majors movie, and I told him I'd watch Creed 3, and we're going to talk about it. So, and then The Guardian, how Jonathan Majors used his post-conviction interview to attack the victim. That sounds like they pulled right from the Grace Jabbari's attorney, Brittany, who came out and made that statement before the full interview even aired, that, oh, this is Jonathan Majors not taking accountability for his actions. Then you watch the interview and he's like, I should have broken up with her. I shouldn't have picked her up. I shouldn't have tried to put her in the car. I should have gotten out of that relationship before that night. And then her side is like, oh, accountability. He's not accountable. Half the interview is him saying mistakes that he made that he should have done. So, and then Denise will be checking out AV's content. I hope to see you guys all over there. Stay tuned. I'll put up a notification when I'm going to do those other testimony readings. But other than that, thank you guys so much for joining. You guys noticed so many details through these transcription readings. If you do want to read them on your own, they'll be in the description. And if I do end up obtaining other transcripts from week 2, I'll make like a YouTube community post, an X post. Obviously, I'll try to do videos to read through them with you guys. If I do make that decision, you'll see them shared at some point somewhere. And then you guys all take care. See you next time or tonight on AV's channel.